Okay, so imagine this. You find out something you were never supposed to know. Not gossip, not some rumor floating around the office. Proof. A document left open on a shared drive. A conversation you weren't meant to overhear. A number in a report that just doesn't add up, no matter how many times you check it. And here's the thing about that moment. Once you've actually seen it, there's no going back. You can't unknow it. You know exactly who it points to. And somewhere in your gut, you already know something else too. The second you say this out loud, you stop being an employee and you start being a liability. And people who benefit from your silence, they don't really have a great track record of letting liabilities just wander off. Nobody tells you this part when they talk about whistleblowers. We paint it like this brave, cinematic moment. It's not. It's terrifying. You're lying awake at 2 a.m. doing math you never wanted to learn. Who else knows that I know? Did I mention it to the wrong person at lunch? How long, realistically, do I have before this gets back to someone who matters? The law, on paper, says, you're protected the moment you file that report. Your gut is telling you something completely different. So, here's the actual question worth asking, not the polite version we put in headlines. When you blow the whistle on people who profit from you staying quiet, does anything at all, actually keep you alive? Let's start recent. Because I think there's this assumption that stuff like this only happens in some far-off country, with a government you'd never trust anyway. It doesn't. John Barnett gave almost 30 years to Boeing, worked his way up to quality manager, which, if you think about it, is exactly the kind of person a company should be thrilled to have. Someone who cares, someone paying attention when nobody else is. And he found real problems, manufacturing shortcuts on the 787 Dreamliner, the same plane regular people board every single day without a second thought. He didn't leak it. He didn't call a journalist. He did it the right way, reported it up the chain internally, then filed it through the actual federal program that exists specifically to protect people in his exact position. What came back, by his own account, was retaliation, performance scores that tanked out of nowhere, getting quietly cut off from the team he used to run. Just contempt, really, from people above him. Eventually, he retired, mostly just to get some breathing room, but he didn't drop it. He kept fighting his case for years, and finally, got Boeing under oath in a deposition. 3 days into that testimony, laying out everything he'd seen, he just stopped showing up. His own lawyers had to call the police. They found him in his truck, in a hotel parking lot, gunshot wound, ruled self-inflicted. No note. And I keep coming back to this question. If the system that's supposed to protect people like him actually worked, why is he the one in a body bag, and not the company he spent years trying to warn? Then there's Suchir Balaji, 26 years old, 4 years deep inside OpenAI as a researcher. This isn't some outsider throwing stones from a distance. He helped build the thing he later stood up against. Somewhere along the way, he became convinced the company was training its models on other people's work in a way that basically amounted to copyright theft, just at a scale nobody had really laid out publicly before. October 2024, he goes on the record. The New York Times runs it. He becomes one of the first people from inside that company to challenge it, by name, in public. A month later, he's found dead in his apartment, gunshot to the head, ruled a suicide. His mother won't accept that. She says he was proud of what he did, that there was no depression in the picture that would explain any of this, and she paid for an independent pathologist to do a second autopsy, which she says shows he was shot in the back of the head, not the front. Not everyone buys her version, honestly. Even people close to the family have gently suggested that grief might be shaping how she's reading all of it. So which is it? A young guy who couldn't handle the weight of taking on one of the most powerful companies on the planet? Or someone who was never, ever going to be allowed to keep talking? Back in 2009, over in Iran, there's a doctor named Ramin Pourandarjani. Not an activist, not a journalist, just a doctor, ordered by police to treat protesters who'd been arrested during that year's disputed election. What he actually saw in that prison wasn't treatment. It was torture. And when one of the detainees died from repeated blows to the head, Pourandarjani didn't just look away and keep his mouth shut. He testified in front of Parliament. And it worked. That specific prison got shut down because of what he said. For one brief moment, doing the right thing actually meant something. Then the state came for him anyway. Arrested, interrogated, released on bail with a threat hanging over him. Stay quiet, or lose your license, or worse. He went back to his normal life anyway. And weeks later, he sat down to eat a salad. Hours later, he was dead. The official story changed 4 separate times. First a car accident, then a heart attack, then suicide, before they finally landed on poisoning, a lethal dose of blood pressure medication that somehow ended up in his food. His own family wasn't even allowed to request an independent autopsy. Think about that for a second. A man survives interrogation by an authoritarian state and doesn't survive a plate of vegetables. Does that sound like an accident to you? Because it doesn't to me. 3 people. 3 completely different countries, 3 completely different systems. But notice something about the first 2. Boeing and OpenAI aren't governments. There's no secret police involved, no rigged election, no prison system pulling strings behind the scenes. Apparently, a company with enough money on the line can produce the exact same outcome all on its own, using nothing more exotic than ordinary office politics. And honestly, death isn't even the worst version of how this plays out. Sometimes it's not one person standing alone in the crosshairs. It's everyone who happens to be standing anywhere near the truth. In August of 1996, a 14-year-old girl disappeared from a public swimming pool in Belgium. Police searched a man named Marc Dutroux's house and found absolutely nothing. 2 days later, somehow, he confesses, and leads them straight to a hidden dungeon where that same girl is still alive. Then to the bodies of 2 more girls he'd already killed. And the public reaction wasn't relief that she'd been found. It was outrage, pure outrage, that police had already searched this man's house once and somehow missed a living victim hidden behind a wall. As the case fell apart in public, people in Belgium started suspecting this went way beyond one man, that there was a wider network, police, officials, protecting him for years. And then, right before the trial could expose exactly who else was involved, the witnesses started dying. 20 people, connected to this one case, gone. One of them was a scrap dealer, Bruno Taliaferro, who told prosecutors he had crucial information about the vehicle used in one of the kidnappings. Days later, dead. Looked like a heart attack. His wife didn't buy it for a second. She secretly sent his tissue samples to the US for independent testing and got back proof he'd been poisoned. Before she could even act on that proof, her own teenage son came home and found her dead too, in their own house. The lead prosecutor on the case died not long after, ruled a suicide, no note. 20 people connected to one investigation, all dead before they could take the stand. How does that many people die around the same case, and it still somehow gets filed away as coincidence? Before we go further, if you like such stories, subscribe to our channel and drop in a like. Here's what none of these laws will ever tell you outright. Whistleblower protection was never really built to protect a person. It was built to protect a process. It guarantees you get a hearing. It guarantees, on paper, your employer can't legally fire you for talking. What it can't do, what it was never actually designed to do, is reach past the courtroom and stop a government intelligence agency, or a brutal prison system, or a company with billions on the line from deciding you're a problem that needs handling in a way no lawsuit can undo. The protection lives inside the system. The threat lives outside it. And the second you cross that line, from the person following the rules to the person the rules were meant to expose, the law can promise you back pay. It cannot promise you'll live long enough to actually collect it. Every single person in this video did exactly what we tell people to do. They didn't leak anonymously. They didn't sell secrets to whoever paid the most. They reported it the right way, through the proper channel, and they cooperated fully, every step of the way. And in the moment it actually mattered, that channel turned out to be exactly as strong as the paper it was printed on. So think back to that moment. You, holding the document, doing the math on what happens next. The law is going to tell you that you're protected. History is going to tell you something else entirely. And somewhere in between those two answers is the thing nobody writes into the statute. Being protected by the law and actually being safe were never the same promise. We just built a system that lets us pretend they are.